Hello, welcome to the Patreon bonus episode of this podcast that is called Lobotomy World. How are you? If you haven't listened to the first hour, the free hour of this, you can do so over on the Lobotomy World YouTube channel. If you're just one of those people that only experiences me through the Patreon, what are you doing? I put out loads of free stuff as well. I just did a podcast where I spoke about transphobic gay men, my washing machine, big washing machine updates this week. You'd be a fool to miss those. I talked about GP surgeries. I talked about the T slur, tranny, went quite deep into that. But that's on that side of that's that hour. Now this is the Patreon hour. This is the private one, the special one. You know how it goes. I hope you're doing well. As I address in the first hour, I'll be honest, I'm not having what feels like the best week. I'm having a kind of nothing like terrible's happened. I just think a lot of stuff is like catching up to me, basically. It can be like that. It can be like that for me. Like sometimes I'm one of those people that like I don't the way I'm feeling like doesn't always hit me immediately. I bottle a lot of stuff up and I try to put on a front sometimes. And sometimes I just genuinely don't know how I feel until it's like too late. Like things have a residual effect. It builds up and then a couple of days later it'll like hit me and I'll like have a little meltdown. That's kind of what this week has been like. In all honesty, I mean, look, because this is a Patreon exclusive episode, I'm pretty comfortable telling you. We can go a bit deeper, I guess. Basically, my day job that I do, without going into too much detail, basically I work as a facilitator, an access facilitator, which basically means that I support people who are disabled in various different ways to do their jobs, you know? And I do that job in the BBC building. Now, here's the thing. I'm not employed by the BBC, okay? They don't pay me. I'm employed by an external company that is themselves commissioned by the BBC to come in and do this stuff. And I like the job. It's a good job. I've definitely had worse jobs. But the truth is right now, with everything that's going on, with the Supreme Court ruling and trans rights in general, and I guess like the way that trans people are being spoken about in the media, I am finding it incredibly hard being in that environment. Like, I am not enjoying being at the BBC. I think, I mean, like, when you first start working in that building, obviously there's a kind of novelty to it, you know? Wow, you know, oh my God, like, newsreaders and journalists that I've seen before, and like, oh my God, like, the canteen, you know, wow, studios, and you know, it's like it's cool, it's undeniably cool, but like during times like this when the whole trans Supreme Court ruling and like trans rights legal stuff is, when it's all just on televisions around you and being pumped through the radio system and journalists are next to you talking about it and all this kind of stuff, it's tough. And, you know, I don't know how many trans people the BBC employs. I don't see very many. Not that I have a perfect radar for trans people, but I'm not going around trying to clock people, but, you know, I'm a trans person, so I'm always kind of like thinking, are there any trans people near me? You know, because often being a trans person, you feel a little bit like ships in the night, really. We're still this is the thing, we are a minority, we're not everywhere. Despite what the media says, we're not taking over. Like, I don't know when the last time I saw a trans person in that building was. So for that reason, I've been finding it very, very difficult trying to like square those things, you know, trying to stay professional and keep my head above it. Because again, as I said, I like the job, but yeah, it's tricky. And this week, honestly, it all kind of came to a bit of a head because I made the huge mistake of listening to Woman's Hour. If you don't know, Woman's Hour is it's a show on BBC Radio 4, which is like a magazine style show. It's been very long running, and it's dedicated to women's issues, but mainly straight, white, cis women's issues, you know? Like, Radio 4 knows who its listenership are, let's be real. Now, the show has had many different presenters over the years, many different producers. You know, it's one of those ones, it's like, it's an institution, to be honest with you, and it's sort of in flux constantly, and I'm sure, like, it's had better moments than others. But in my experience over the last sort of like 10 to 15 years, I'm not an active listener of it, but I definitely dip in and out. And I definitely dip in and out when trans issues are being spoken about, because I like to know what their point of view is on what's going on. And I'm interested in how such a banner, you know, prestigious women's magazine show is addressing transgender rights. And over the past 10 or 15 years that I've been checking in on it, I have to tell you, I believe that it has been doing an abysmal job. I do not think that Women's Hour cares about trans people particularly at all. The way they speak about us is crazy, especially from an organisation like the BBC, which if you're watching / listening to this and you are in another country that doesn't quite understand what the BBC is or how the BBC works, you know, the BBC it's a public service, like in the same way that I guess it's comparable to like NPR if you are in America. It's a taxpayer sort of funded, I mean, you buy a TV license, you literally have to pay for it, service. And for that reason, you know, they've always had traditionally a policy of like impartiality, which means that they're not allowed to advertise. Like, they don't advertise external products and services. They don't have like adverts at all, which is quite nice. Except that they have adverts for like their own things. Like if they have an app or whatever, they'll have an advert for it, or a show. But also, they're not supposed to take like a hardline political stance. So for example, like if they're having a debate, they have to have it equally, quote unquote, equally, you know, stacked. So there's like a representative of the left and a representative of the right, but one of the things that happens with trans issues is, for some reason, the way they interpret that is they always have like a trans person, any trans person, versus an ardent transphobe. And I just don't think that's what impartiality is. And I think Women's Hour I think it knowingly does it. I think Women's Hour definitely has a very clear agenda. And it has done throughout the years, you know. And this particular episode, that is obviously about the Supreme Court ruling and what it means for trans people. Basically, they had on Helen Joyce, who, if you don't know, she's like one of the founders of some of these like trans hate groups. And she is pretty instrumental in this Supreme Court ruling going the way it did, you know. She's honestly, I mean, in my opinion, a despicable person. I don't think her intentions are pure at all. I don't think she genuinely cares about the plight of her fellow women. I think she just honestly hates trans people. I've never seen any evidence to the contrary with her. And it really infuriates me that, like, an institution like the BBC that is supposed to be so thorough and, you know, clever and sophisticated, that they can't see through it. Which leads me to think, you know, because I don't believe that that's the case. I think the BBC does really good work in some other places, you know. There's a lot to compliment the BBC about. I'm not one of these, like, hardline BBC haters. We get them. You see them, like, protesting outside the BBC. And usually they're protesting because they think the BBC is run by child molesters. I don't know. I don't think it is. As someone who spends a lot of time in the building, I'd say it's mainly run by people who, like weird, like, journalist types. I don't know what they do in their spare time, but, you know. So because I don't actually believe that they're not doing their, you know, due diligence, I think they're very clever. I think they know what they're doing. I think the BBC does have somewhat of a anti-trans agenda. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't be platforming people like that. And they wouldn't be buying into their rhetoric so easily, which is what they're doing. And that's the most dispiriting thing. And, you know, the BBC is terrible on other issues. It's really not done well on Palestine, you know, for instance. The Gaza issue, the BBC have, like, really dropped the ball on it. And then also there's the stuff about, you know, there was this thing recently where, like, there's a statue outside the BBC. And it's a cool statue. Like, I'm not going to, like, it's a nice looking statue. It's a technically good piece of art. I can't remember the name of the guy who sculpted it. But anyway, the point is, the guy who sculpted it turned out to be, like, a sicko who, like, molested his kids and his dog. And just a bad guy. And then because of that, somebody damaged the statue with a hammer. And then they had, like, scaffolding up of it for, like, ages. And I don't know, I just feel like a sensible institution maybe would have been like, let's change it. I feel like stuff like that, it's like, if you really want to keep it around, it's a bit like the sort of Colston statue and all that kind of stuff. It's like, if you really need it to still be around, put it in a museum. You know, just put it in a museum. That's where we can contextualize and look back on problematic things. That's what museums should be for, really. It's like looking at the past and being like, oh, isn't it crazy that we used to think that was okay? They're historical. But having it on the side of your institution, one that is, like, dangerously affiliated with a prolific sex offender, Jimmy Savile, I just don't think it's the best call. I just don't think it's the best call. There's lots of little things like that, you know. And I'm not just bringing these up because I feel resentful of Women's Hour, which I do. What I'm just trying to say is like, the BBC is not a perfect organisation. And this Women's Hour interview, like, it just really rubbed me the wrong way. Like, super rubbed me the wrong way, because the thing about the BBC that I've always thought is, like, well, for all their faults, I didn't think that they would be so quick to gleefully embrace this ruling. And because Women's Hour is a BBC show that is, you know, written and produced and prepared in some of the same areas that I work in, and I'm, like, essentially rubbing shoulders with these people, I don't know, it just started to really mess with me a little bit this week. Kind of pushed me over the edge a little bit. And, you know, I have been continuing to use the women's toilets within the BBC, but this conversation was directly about that issue. Not so much within the BBC, but just within life. And essentially Helen Joyce was saying that any trans woman, or as she affectionately refers to us as men, biological men, if any of us are using the women's toilets, continuing to use the women's toilets, her advice was basically like, if you're a bio woman, if you are biologically female, if you see a trans woman and they are continuing to do that, that we should be reported for like sexual assault or sexual harassment. Sorry, like we're sexually harassing because we're going in there to use the toilet. And I found it, honestly, like I just found it was, I mean, obviously, like, listen, this is the kind of diarrhea that she is known for spewing, but the lack of pushback, like the actual lack of pushback, and the sort of the acceptance that was like a normal way of thinking about this situation. And there was one moment in the interview when they were referring to a previous guest who is like a trans woman, and the presenter referred to her as he, just openly just referred, because she was talking to Helen Joyce and she clearly agrees with her and she clearly wanted to be in her good graces. So she did that. She made that decision. She made that choice. And it made me feel sick. It really made me feel sick. Like just the absolute cowardice of it. And it's hard, like when you're in a situation like that, you don't know where you stand, because obviously, and I do plan on talking to my employers about this, not about Women's Hour, but just about like, what can I do? Am I able to still continue to use the toilets? Because I am stubborn, and I will not. I know that a lot of people don't like to hear this, but I will not use the mixed toilets or the disabled toilet. And that is purely out of principle, and that is purely stubbornness, and I admit that. But if you don't have principle, what do you have? I refuse to be characterized as a potential threat. And that's one of the things that is happening all the time. I think if we give up and we just concede on this and we go, oh yeah, it does make the majority of women uncomfortable. The majority of women who don't even know me and don't know anything about me and shouldn't assume anything about me because it's none of their business. Yeah, because I make them uncomfortable, I'm going to stop using the women's toilets. No, I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing for the last 13 or so years. I don't care if you think that's selfish, self-interested. I personally think the only one really here being selfish are the opposition to this, because yeah, I could use the mixed toilets, but I feel like every time I do that now, I feel like if I do that, I'm like outing myself. I'm conceding, and I'm saying, yeah, you've got a point. And I'm going to go in here where I'm contained, just in case I get the urge to start flashing everybody. Give me a break, I'm sorry, there's only so much of this you can take before you start to think, hold on a minute, am I a doormat? Am I a literal doormat? And on the disabled toilet conversation, call me old-fashioned, call me a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, call me woke, call me a snowflake, call me a taxi, am I right? Call me whatever you like. Last time I checked, aren't disabled toilets for disabled people? Now, of course, there are trans people who are disabled. There are disabled people who are trans. There's intersectionalism here. But just broadly speaking, is it really helpful for disabled people who need those facilities to have additional barriers put in place by trans people who don't know where to go? Is that really sensible? I don't think so. I mean, especially as I am working in a field where I'm supposed to be helping disabled people. And it got me to thinking, this whole thing, it got me to thinking about my old job. I have a history of care work. I worked for 5 years in learning disabilities care home, in a learning disabilities care home for adults, looking after people, really vulnerable people of varying different disabilities and sometimes behavioural issues. And, I was an out trans woman then too. And like in my current job, I didn't talk about it a lot. I didn't mention it in my interview. It never came up at all, actually, as a problem. I looked after both women and men. I even looked after a couple of trans people. None of the people I worked with had a problem with me giving them their personal care or taking them out or helping them in the toilet or, any of the routine stuff that you have to do when you are a support worker. And I find it really worrying that, if I was still doing that job today, I would not feel comfortable publicly doing my job. I mean, like there are things that I used to have to do in that job that, you have to have a certain level of resolve. Like, for example, like I would look after men and I would have to check on them in the toilets. And you just kind of go, you get to that point where you just are like, listen, I'm sorry if this makes you uncomfortable, guys, but I'm supporting this person. I need to check they're okay. I'm coming in. Likewise, I would have to, look after women and I would help them in the toilet. And it taught me a lot of kind of like, it taught me a lot of confidence myself as somebody who, I'm a trans woman. I sometimes do feel worried in the women's bathroom. I always have, because I think very few trans women have gotten by without having any negative experiences from people, particularly in like, bars and pubs and anywhere where there's alcohol or whatever. But I'm thinking about it, like nowadays, like what would it be like? I mean, listen, I've always believed that like anybody in that context, if they're not comfortable with any kind of care that they're getting, whether it be from a man, a woman, anybody, they're entitled to that. If someone says, I'm not comfortable with Jen doing my personal care, blah, 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 I'd be like, great, fine. That's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's less work for me, ultimately. In that job, you have like a million things you'd rather be doing, I'd be like, fine, I'll go do some crafts with somebody, whatever. But I do think it's deeply sad because I was a good carer. I loved that job. When that job was good, it was great. When it was bad, it was awful. There's lots of things that I could go into about the management and, the system and things like that. And, But when it was good, it was great. The pay wasn't, but, there are other things that are great about it. And the idea that would be compromised, the idea that someone would not be able to receive good care from a caring person. Again, this is it's such a... People always think about trans people in the context of like, we're just these lonely, devious people who just want to get into the bathroom. And it's like, no, we're like living full lives. We're like working people. There are lots of trans nurses, lots of trans carers, trans doctors. That's that whole thing. I mean, I don't know if you saw that the Peggy case or whatever it was called, the whole thing about this trans doctor who was using a women's changing room, and then this nurse was like so disgusted and like so offended that they had to be in there with them, like they had to be. They went to trial, and that was just before the Supreme Court ruling. And I remember like one of the things that stood and also she insisted, the legal team insisted that they would not be referring to this doctor as a woman. They would be misgendering her throughout. I just remember thinking like, wow, this is where we're at, you know? Isn't the doctor supposed to be like the one who gets the respect? Not that nurses shouldn't get respect, but do you know what I mean? Isn't there some kind of hierarchy here? I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this doctor whose like whole vocation is like to try and help people, and like, not that nurses aren't, but like what? But why is this nurse going out of her way to like be such? You know what I'm trying to say. It's crazy. What I'm saying is that trans people, you know, we're doing jobs. We want to be part of society. That's the sad thing. We want to help. You know, we want to have purpose in our lives, meaning. We want to connect with people. We want to help. This is the sad thing. It's like at every turn, we're just trying so hard to be a part of society. And we're like pleading with you to like understand us and to try and let us join in. And then you guys, not you who's like enjoying this podcast, but you know, the royal you, society, is like, no, we don't want you actually. You're a deviant, you're a pervert, you're an autogynephile. Like, you need to leave. That's what's hard, I think. That's I'd say that's like one of, for me anyway, psychologically, that's not one of the most difficult things to come to terms with, even after all this time. And it's like, it's the kind of experience, I think, that turns a lot of trans people onto segregationalist feeling, you know, this idea, like, I've certainly thought this, you know, this idea that, like, it would be better if we just did our own thing. I mean, it's impossible. I mean, I'm not saying it's like, I'm not saying we should start, like, something like the Black Israelites movement, you know, but what I'm saying is like, as a hypothetical, wouldn't it be nice if trans people just, like, had their own island? Not Ireland. Island. If we had our own island, nice tropical island, we could start our own society, have our own businesses, you know, that kind of thing. And listen, it's absurd. It would never work. We, like, trans people, we can't even get a good speaker system at a protest. Do you know what I mean? Like, it would be a nightmare. But theoretically, at least, what I'm saying is like, sometimes I've been guilty of thinking maybe that's the solution. Obviously it's not. Obviously I continue to want to be a part of society. I continue to want to engage and contribute. It's funny that, like, one of the things that I get very often in comment sections on my videos and stuff is like this is a weird one, but like, I get accused of, like, not having a job a lot. There's this implication that, like, it's always like, my taxes go to your sex change operation. And while you're just sitting at home jerking off, you autogynephile, it's like, what is your worldview? Like, where do you get your information from? It's like, it's twisted. It's really twisted. Because I have a job. In fact, I have like 3 jobs, if you're being real. Like, I'm working, I don't have to explain myself, but I'm working full time. I'm doing the online shit. That's a job. I make some money from this. I'd say that's a part-time job that I have. And I'm pursuing the writing and the stand-up all the time as well. It's like, how much work you want me to do, for God's sake? And I'm still struggling. I think if I was offered tickets to that island, I'd probably give it a go at this point. But that's the thing, right? I don't want to, really. It's true. I wish things were better here. And this whole toilet thing, it's kind of ridiculous in a way. It's forcing us to talk about toilets too much. I do believe it to be a really important issue. Like being denied access to spaces that are vital to affirming your identity. And I know that I know these TERFs hate it when you frame it this way. They frame it like, well, why is that more important than the safety of women and girls? And it's like, well, it's not, but it doesn't affect the safety of women and girls in any tangible way. It's a ridiculous straw man argument, completely just like not clever at all. But then I'm thinking like, well, but you know, if you actually think about it, it's like extremely important. Like if you care at all about trans people, and I'm fully aware that like there's a lot of people out there right now who openly don't. They're just flat out saying it with their whole chest that they don't give a shit about trans people. And in a way, I prefer that. You know, in a way, I like to know who the shits are. But if you are a person who cares about our well-being in any tangible way, I think it's very naive not to look at this issue and be like, well, this seems important to them. This seems important to trans people. This seems to be something that... Because it's not about, ultimately, like me wanting to use the women's toilet. It's not about me wanting to physically be in that space. You know, if we were all using separate toilets, if that was the norm, in all honesty, like, I think everybody would prefer that. I don't think the toilets system is set up in a way that is particularly like future facing. I don't think it's like, I don't think people love the way that toilets are generally. No one goes into the toilets, public toilets at the airport and goes, these are great, I love this. I love waiting in a huge line with my sisters while I'm nearly going to piss myself. I love this. I love the kids running around me, and I love like the sound of the hand dryer like caning my ears. I love it when the taps splash me all over my crotch. That's so fun. I love the public toilets. I love going into the cubicle and it just being full up with shit and toilet paper. This is wicked. No one's thinking that. Trans or cis, no one is thinking that. If we had just like a kind of single cubicle thing and there was enough for everybody, like Portaloo situation but nicer, of course I'd be doing that. But the problem is, and the problem is that the reason for this whole Supreme Court thing, it isn't for safety, okay? It's just so transparent that that's not what it's for. It is to literally just exclude us, even though they know that we're not a risk. They know that we're not. There's no precedent for it. There's just no precedent for it. So what the actual intent of it is, it's just to other. It's just to segregate. It's just to say, you're not allowed in here because you are a man. Which completely just like devalues, obviously, it devalues people's entire life and identity. People are very quick to go, it's realism. It's that's biological truth. Can't handle it? Okay, snowflake. Well, it's like, well, it's not truth, is it? Because truth doesn't ignore all of the other social lived experience. Like, truth shouldn't do that. Truth shouldn't ignore all of the women who say, no, I don't mind this. This is something, you know, I don't want to exclude trans people from these spaces. I don't feel threatened. Truth doesn't exclude that. This version of it does. But just to circle back, so like the reason why it's important then for me to continue using the women's toilets is because I refuse to concede and to allow your version, again, the royal you, not literally you, but to allow your version of the truth to persist, because it's not the truth. It's a poisoned mischaracterization of the truth. In fact, we really shouldn't be trusting anybody who believes that they have an objective truth, an objective idea of what the truth definitively is. Not to get on my philosophical high horse again, not to be accused of being some sort of postmodernist, neo-Marxist or whatever Jordan Peterson might like to say. Making truth claims, such as the ones they're doing with biology, and oversimplifying it to the point of kind of offensiveness. Like sometimes I think, like, wow, like, you really don't have enough faith in the British public to be able to understand such insane concepts as like social gender or chromosomal science. Like, do people out there actually believe that XX and XY are the only options? Is that really what people think? Do people think it's that simple? I don't understand how people can exist within a society that is so dependent on complex science in medicine, scientific advancement, and yet when it comes to another complex issue like this, people are just like, nah, it's simple actually. Actually, it's very simple. Willie is boy, Fanny is girl. And if you don't understand that, I'm going to beat you up. Like, it's like, come on, like, share a brain cell, please. And of course, the irony is that this is starting to have an effect on cis women, you know? I've read like 3 reports just this week of usually lesbian women being harassed in ladies' room female toilets because the security or the locals or whoever is seeing these people who do not present as stereotypically feminine, and they are assuming that they are men. And this is the problem. When you have such a simplistic worldview, and when you think that you are the arbiter of who's who and who's what, and that you understand everything that you're seeing at all times, and that you are so steadfast in your perception of what reality is, it's like you're going to make these kind of stupid mistakes and you're going to look like an idiot. The whole thing, if you think about it, just demonstrates the pure absurdity of the situation. You have a cis woman, i.e. a woman who was assigned female at birth, not trans in any way, going into the toilet and then being accused of being a man, despite no evidence, despite, there's none of their business. And then the solution to this issue is that in order to make this women's space safe for women, a male security guard has to come in and sort it all out. They have to come in and they have to restrain or, lay down the law. And it's like, now you have an actual man in the women's room, which is something that you didn't want even from the start, but you don't mind having a man in there if it's to oppress and demonize a queer person, essentially. Like, it's like things are so twisted right now. It's like at a level of absurdity that, for lack of a better term, because it is an overused term, it's very Kafkaesque, actually. And what I mean by that is that, yeah, there's loads of bugs in there as well. Loads of bugs in the toilet. Sometimes bugs crawl out of the toilet. I just feel like we've got everything backwards. I just feel that the most sensible solution to this whole thing is simple. It's so simple. It makes perfect sense. Like, gender critical, trans-fearing, transphobic weirdos, they are the minority of women, okay? So with that in mind, if a woman goes into the women's toilets and they see someone who they perceive to be a trans person, the solution is, if they feel uncomfortable, they should go and use the mixed sex or the disabled toilet. Because they're the minority. Like, they're the one who has the issue. So if they have the issue, they should be the one to do something about it. Because to me, this whole thing is all about, autonomy, personal freedom. Make yourself comfortable, basically. Because when I'm in there, I'm just in and out. That's just the truth. I'm in and I'm out. And in between that, I might wash my hands. I will wash my hands. But you're in there, kicking up a fuss, getting all worked up and, having a fit or whatever. Like, you should probably have your own space. You should. Because I know how to behave in public, actually. My mum was very good at teaching me those things. She taught me a lot about how to not judge and make assumptions about other people. So, if you're scared, if you see me in a toilet and you're scared and you're offended, I think it's best for you to go and use the disabled toilet. It's not best for me, somebody who that has nothing to do with, okay? I literally don't know you. Like, I've never met you, not involved in your life, have no access to your story, don't want to know you. Why is it on me then to change what I'm doing? The last thing I want to talk about before I wrap this up is I just want to talk about the fact that political parties this year have been banned, and there are pushes to ban more of them from Pride events. And I just want to say that I think that's great. I think it's perfect. I think that's what we need to do. When we have a Pride event, whether it be London Pride, Edinburgh Pride, I'm sure there are other places, Brighton Pride, Liverpool Pride, do they have one? When we do that, we should not only disinvite, but actively work to keep out all political parties, especially Labour right now. Because Labour are a party that are letting down trans people in a way that I never could have imagined they would do. It's so awful what's going on with them. Especially Keir Starmer. I do not want to see Keir Starmer with a little pride flag painted on his face again, giving little speeches about how, love is love and expression is important. And it's going to shut up, okay? You don't get to be here anymore. You've let down trans people too much. You've lost your gay pass, okay? I don't care that Wes Streeting, okay? I don't care if you've got gay friends. Wes Streeting's not allowed there either. None of you lot. This is what I would say to the Labour Party. If you're going to act like a bunch of Tory freaks, if you're going to act conservative, and if you're going to, invoke Enoch Powell in your speeches, and if you're going to, support rulings that strip trans people of their rights, if you're going to do that, then you're not welcome at Pride, okay? It's about time that Pride got its shit together. It's about time it dropped all of its corporate sponsorships. It's about time that Pride just focused on what it's actually about, which ironically isn't really about Pride, is it? It's let's be real. Maybe pride is like the wrong word. Maybe we should change the word for pride. Maybe we should call it anger. Maybe it should be called the Resilience Festival. That's terrible. I don't want to see people dance. Like, okay, look, people can dance. Okay, I'm not going to gatekeep dancing. I think pride can be happy, it can be fun, it can be light. But there should be a part of it that is furious. Like, you can have both. You can have the parade and you can have a march. Like, we need more of a march. And when I say a march, I don't mean like, there shouldn't be floats in a march. Okay, I like a float. I've got nothing against a themed float. But you can't march with a float. Okay? At a certain point, we're going to have to deviate away from the floats and we're going to have to march. And that means, you know, being angry. You have to be angry. You have to be, you have to know what you want. And you have to fight for it. And the thing about Labour is, and Keir Starmer in particular, is that he doesn't know anything about fighting for what he wants. He doesn't want anything. All he wants is to be in power. He is one of the most spineless, flip-flopping guys ever. And he's ugly. Okay, all right. I'll make a deal with Keir Starmer. You can attend Pride this year, but you have to give us Wes Streeting as like an offering. No, I mean it. Like you can come to Pride if you want. I will personally let Keir Starmer. He can like paint the little flag on his face, and he can be there. He can have a drink even. But he has to let us put Wes Streeting in a giant wicker man, and he has to light it, and we have to watch it burn, and not intervene when we hear the screams. You know, we just have to push through it. We'll turn up Charlie XCX even louder, just to drown it out a little bit. And then you can come to Pride. Deal? Deal. Alright, thanks for tuning in to Lobotomy World this week. Hopefully have a slightly more upbeat one next week. And again, look out for my new video that's coming out this week about trans-hating gay men, which is a lovely topic to talk about. I hope you have a nice week. I think I already said that. Alright, bye-bye.